Hi everybody, so today we're going to be talking about expectations. What expectations are, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly about expectations, what they do, and why we actually want to open ourselves up to something which gives us a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more possibility. One of the first things that we're going to be talking about today is that you have expectations around everything, right? And one of the analogies that I like to give is the hot pan analogy, which is if there was a hot pan on the stove, you could hold the expectation that if you went up and you put your hand on that hot pan, you would burn it like crazy. That is something called a healthy expectation. It's something that keeps you healthy. It's something that keeps you safe. That is a good expectation to have, right? It's a healthy, non-limiting expectation. However, here's what happens. We develop expectations around things in all different areas of our life. We develop an expectation in a relationship. We develop an expectation of ourselves. We develop an expectation of our parents, our family, our friends, of the microwave, all sorts of different things, right? It's endless. Where there's a story, there's usually an expectation, right? And this is heavily into the language of the mind. The mind likes to try to predict the future, and this expectation comes from that, right? So the expectation, language-wise, sounds something like this. Should, right? It should be like this. It should not be like that, right? This is where the expectation lives in our language specifically. That is the indication that we have a story somewhere. We have some sort of past experience somewhere, and the past experience is determining what we think will happen in the future. Now, like I said, not all expectations are bad, okay? Like the hot pan, right? I almost hit myself in the face. That would have hurt, right? So I can expect that would have hurt. So this pan, right, if it was hot and you put it on the stove, right, and you went up and touched it, that's a positive expectation. But the negative expectations come when they become severely limiting of your experience, right? So imagine if you have a friend, right? And you always expect them to be a specific way. If we hold this view, we've talked about this in the past, if we hold this view, we hold this expectation that they are a specific way, what will happen is that we will go out seeking more evidence that they are that way, and we will find it inevitably, and then it locks our story up, okay? So, our expectation, we go seek out evidence for that expectation. That's what our mind does, right? It's a gathering machine. It's a data collecting machine. It's a story creating machine. And then when we find that evidence, it locks up our story even further. And then we go out and we seek it even more and more and more, and it locks us even up further and further and further. We've talked about this about story before, right? So expectations are simply our mind's projection of what we believe should happen in the future, okay? It's a projection. Now, what we talked about the future is that the future is a gigantic unknown, but the mind doesn't like that. So the mind will generate a specific amount of expectations about things in order to keep it safe, right? But that can also heavily limit you, which is if we create expectations around people, around situations, around things that are inherently limiting and based off of a couple of experiences that we have had, it doesn't give us the capacity to open up to new experiences happening, right? So if you hold the expectation that your friend is always a specific way, you actually shut that person down from even being able to show you that they are many different ways. Or even further, you shut yourself down from even viewing that they can be different ways. This is combined, right? Both of those things happen. So, what's the offer? What is the path of development? What's the path of growth? We want to drop our expectations as much as we can. Now, remember, there are some healthy expectations, and there's also probably some negative expectations, some expectations that don't serve you. So the big question that we want to ask ourselves, what seems to come up in many different coaching videos here and trainings is, does this expectation serve me? Does it, and then you could follow up by, does this expectation limit me? Does it limit my possibilities for experience in this world? Does it limit my view? Does it limit my my potential outcome for new things happening, right? What we want to do in this life is we want to give ourselves a ton of option, a ton of choice to live in a world of color, not just black and white. And when you can ask yourself, does this serve me, right? Does this expectation limit me? You might find that it actually does limit you, okay? And if it does limit you, you can go, okay, I'm going to drop my expectation of what is going to happen here or how this person is going to be. I'm going to drop that expectation and I am going to open myself up to all possibility. That is our end goal here. That's what we're really working on. We want to be open to possibility. We want to be open to things happening. We want to be open to new things happening in our life so it can broaden our view of the world. It can then help us go out into the world and open up to all possibility. And then our stories are actually very well-rounded, very, very healthy, rather than severely limited and probably most likely locked up in fear in some way. We want to expand, we want to open, we want to see that there's a lot of choice, right? So if you hold an expectation that you have to have coffee every morning, I'm using something silly, of course, but if you hold the expectation that you have to have coffee every morning, and then you finally get to a point in your life where you're like, oh God, like I'm really dependent on this, but you can't let go of it, you have to ask yourself, right, does this expectation that I have about having to have coffee every day because of X, Y, and Z, does that serve me? The answer is no, it doesn't serve me. Okay, so I'm going to transition. I'm going to open myself up to new opportunities of doing different things. Maybe instead of going and working out in the morning, you go work out in the evening so you don't feel like you have to have the coffee. So it opens up your world, right? And this is essentially what we're looking to do here. We're looking to live in choice. We're looking to drop our expectations. And as Shakespeare so famously said, expectation is the root of all heartache. Because when we expect something to go a specific way, or when we expect someone to do something specific, or when we expect this or that, life rarely happens the way that you want it to. Life happens, but on its own terms. So when we drop our expectations, we live in alignment with how life works, which is, it's a great mystery, okay? Now there's something called experience and there's something called wisdom, and those things are wonderful things, but if they limit you, right, they aren't experience and wisdom, or they might be negative experiences. If those things limit you, you have to release yourself from expecting that thing to happen again the same way, because that's just the reality, is things don't happen the same way all the time, right? Things change, things morph, and you have to open yourself to new possibilities. So the challenge here and the practice to take on is really beginning to look at the things that you have stories about and then going, okay, I am going to try to drop my expectation of how this is going to go, then drop it and then go do the thing or go experience the thing and see what happens. Try to keep your eyes as uncolored as possible and open to all new things happening, and that is going to give you a lot of experience. That is going to make things change. That's going to broaden out your story. It's going to expand your life, and you're going to see how wonderful this is. Okay? So give this a go. Expectations, see if you can drop them. Also, see which ones might be a little bit healthy for you. That's okay too, all right? And get balanced. I'll see you later. And let me know in the comment section, by the way, if you have any questions about this. All right, now I will see you later.